So my final year project was a thematic comparison of self-representational and pop cultural depictions of autism. I've broken my presentation down into 4 main sections. First, I will introduce what my project was about, my study was about, then I'll explain what autism is and also what it is not. I'll present my main findings and finally some recommendations. My study focused on the portrayals of autism in the media. My introduction included definitions of autism and any other relevant key terms such as sensory overload and functioning labels. It also examined pre-existing literature within the field of disability studies. This consisted of 4 main categories: diagnosing autism, autism stereotypes, autism and language usage, and disability activism, including the neurodiversity movement. I also had a methodology section where I explained how I went about with finding my data, and my conclusion acted as a summary of my main findings and also provided recommendations for creators of media sources that deal with the topic of autism. My main focus was comparing self-representational media sources within pop culture to self-representational sources with pop culture sources. So for this, I focused on the Netflix series Atypical, and I compared it with videos from disability self-advocates. As I am, just define autism as a lifelong neurodevelopmental disability present from birth, which causes difficulty in communicating, forming relationships, understanding abstract concepts, and sensory processing. As I Am is an autism charity and advocacy group, and it was set up by Adam Harris, who is the brother of Simon Harris, the Minister for Higher Education. Adam Harris is autistic, and he's one of the many self-advocates on board the As I Am team. I also want to focus on things that autism is not. First of all, autism is not a childhood disorder. Not all autistic individuals or children are act in a childlike manner. Please don't treat us like children. Remember, we're human too. Being a savant or super genius, this sets unfair expectations on us. And like our neurotypical peers, we have our flaws and our own talents that may not necessarily be to do with science like the media perceives. Limited to boys and men. Despite what the media may have you believe, girls, trans, non-binary, and under-gender non-conforming individuals can be autistic too. High or low functioning. These labels are used to kind of help autistic or non-autistic people understand who we are and how autism works. However, they're very harmful, and spoiler alert, they don't exist. To use a slogan from a Smirnoff campaign, labels are for bottles and not for people. Finally, autism is not always visible. Shocker, yes, some of us are also autistic individuals like myself, and as Rachel said, Rachel too, as she has pointed out, look normal. And for me, I believe that normal is a social construct. I'm not going to present my main findings. Overall, I focused on 10 stereotypes, but for now I'm going to present 2. One of the stereotypes I focused on is the savant or super genius. This sets unfair expectations on the individual. An example from Atypical was that it focused on Sam's obsession with penguins, as well as his ability to remember penguin-related facts. It also used penguins as a metaphor for Sam, and while that while this doesn't show how he navigates his life, overall the way it was perceived, or at least from me as an autistic individual, promoted the savant and child stereotype, which are negative. However, Atypical did have some good points. For example, it also promoted Sam's artistic skills, which allowed him to get into a scientific illustration program in college. Another stereotype I focused on was the dependent. The effect this has on autistic individuals is that it reduces their independence and ability levels. An example of this from Atypical is that Sam wants to attend Elsa, Sam's mother, wants him to attend a community college where he can take a few classes at a time, whereas Sam wants to attend a regular college. On the other hand, his father, Doug, allows him to make decisions for himself, treats him as an adult and an equal, and even encourages some of his autistic traits and qualities. I also focused on a set of themes, about 6 overall. The first of these were functioning labels. Within Atypical, Julia, who is Sam's therapist, states that her brother is not as high functioning as Sam. I combated this with a video from Chloe Hayden, who is a YouTuber and autistic self-advocate. Like myself, Chloe is against functioning labels, and her video explains why they are harmful. Basically, functioning labels focus on like the harmful or negative traits within an individual and whether they're high or low functioning. And this can stop the individual from reaching their full potential. In her video, Chloe reminds people that functioning labels don't exist. Whoops. She also used a colour palette like the one I have on screen to show that autism is a spectrum. Very briefly, she explained that someone could be a colour like green, another person is purple, and that these colours are different, yet they're not any less a colour. In the same way, autistic individuals might have their differences and similarities, but they're no less autistic and no less human. Another theme I'd focus in first is identity first language. Within the show Atypical, Elsa's parent support group promotes person first language. However, this is quite taboo in the autistic community. I compounded this with a video from Jessica Crelgan-Crozart, who is a disability activist. In this video, she explained the difference between person versus identity first language. Basically, person first language puts the person before the disability, and it's preferred within most of the disabled community, including by Crelgan-Crozart herself. Whereas identity first language states that the disability is part of who the person is. And this is something I prefer, and also something that Chloe Hayden is for. I made 3 main recommendations overall, but I'm just going to focus on 2 for now. The first is to cast autistic actors in autistic roles. I believe this allows for authenticity because autistic individuals have lived experience of being autistic and therefore can play the role of an autistic character properly, as opposed to casting a neurotypical or allotypical character who may have to go off research. In Atypical, the main character Sam is played by Claire Gilchrist, who is not autistic, and there's only one or at least one confirmed autistic actor in it, in Atypical, and this is for a minor role. I believe that casting one actor for a minor role is not enough. The casting of autistic actors, or the lack thereof, became controversial a lot lately because of Sia's movie Music. In short, this movie is full of ableism. It's really inaccurate, or at least from what I've watched from the trailer. And most importantly, she didn't hire an autistic actor and instead hired Maddie Ziegler, who was her prodigy, And her reason for not hiring an artistic actor was she believed that a high intensity working environment was unfair to an autistic individual. However, even from personal experience and also from doing a bit of research on other autistic actors, this is possible. Another change I feel that could be made when writing TV shows and films, etc., is to include input from autistic individuals in script writing. It also allows for accuracy, as they're able to point out what is wrong, what is right, and then where these changes can be made. And thank you for listening.